Imagine living in a neighborhood where every small thing you do is watched, judged, and controlled by a group of people who think they know best. Imagine being told what color your house should be, how tall your grass can grow, and even what you can park in your own driveway. Sounds frustrating, right? Well, that's the reality many homeowners face when they live under the strict rules of a homeowners association, also known as an HOA. Now, here's where it gets interesting. What happens when the HOA goes too far? What happens when they stop being about community standards and start acting like bullies? Today, you're going to hear a story that will keep you hooked until the very end. A story about how an HOA tried to tow away one man's tractor, but instead of backing down, he turned the tables and towed away something that belonged to them. The problem begins. It all started with a tractor. To some people, a tractor is just a big, noisy machine meant for farms. But for the man in this story, the tractor wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was his tool, his helper, and part of his daily life. He used it to maintain his property, keep his yard in shape, and sometimes even help neighbors. It was parked neatly on his land, not blocking anyone, not harming anything. But the HOA saw it differently. To them, the tractor was an eyesore. They claimed it didn't fit the community image. They said tractors were not allowed to be parked outside, even though it was clearly on his property. Now, think about this for a moment. Shouldn't a homeowner have the right to park their own equipment on their own land? Isn't that part of the freedom of owning a home? This is where the clash of values begins. Personal freedom versus HOA control. The threat. At first, the homeowner thought it was just a warning, maybe a letter or two reminding him of the rules. But soon, those letters turned into threats. The HOA told him that if he didn't remove the tractor immediately, they would have it towed away. Imagine the nerve of that, threatening to tow someone's private property from their own yard with no real justification other than, we don't like how it looks. It wasn't blocking the street. It wasn't leaking oil. It wasn't abandoned. It was just sitting there, safe and sound, doing no harm. The homeowner couldn't believe it. It wasn't just about a tractor anymore. It was about principle. It was about standing up to unfair rules and unreasonable authority. The decision to fight back. Now, some people in this situation might have given up. They might have said, fine, I'll hide the tractor in the garage, or I'll just move it somewhere else. But not this man. He wasn't about to let the HOA push him around. Instead, he came up with a plan, a bold, unexpected plan that would not only make a point but also turn the tables on the very people who were trying to control him. His idea? If they could threaten to tow his tractor, then he would tow something of theirs. And not just anything. He was going to tow their prized possession, the huge, fancy sign that stood in front of the HOA clubhouse. Why the sign? The HOA sign wasn't just a piece of wood or metal. It was a symbol. It represented the rules, the authority, and the control the HOA had over the neighborhood. It was polished, well-kept, and proudly displayed for everyone to see. Every homeowner who drove past that sign was reminded of the HOA's presence. By targeting the sign, the homeowner wasn't just playing a prank. He was sending a message. He was saying, if you think you can come after my property, then don't forget your property isn't untouchable either. The build-up. Before he acted, the homeowner carefully thought it through. He knew this wasn't just about anger or revenge. It was about balance. It was about showing the HOA that they couldn't bully him without consequences. He made sure everything he did was within his rights. After all, the sign was placed partly on his property line, something the HOA had overlooked when they installed it years ago. That little detail gave him the leverage he needed. The HOA might have thought they had power, but they had unknowingly stepped onto his territory. The big move. One morning, while the neighborhood was quiet, the homeowner fired up his tractor. The same tractor the HOA wanted to tow away. Slowly and steadily, he hooked it up to the clubhouse sign. With one strong pull, the tractor yanked the sign right out of the ground. Can you imagine the sight? The sign that once stood tall and proud, suddenly dragged across the dirt by the very machine the HOA hated so much. It was a picture of irony. Their attempt to get rid of his tractor had backfired, and now it was his tractor doing the towing. The reactions. News spread quickly. Neighbors came out to watch. Some cheered quietly, glad that someone had finally stood up to the HOA. Others were shocked, unsure of what would happen next. And the HOA? Oh, they were furious. They sent more letters, demanded explanations, and even threatened legal action. But the homeowner stayed calm. He reminded them of the property line. He reminded them that the sign was on his land. And he reminded them that if they wanted to tow his tractor, they'd have to think twice, because he was more than capable of towing something of theirs. The lesson behind the story. This story isn't just about a tractor and a sign. It's about power, fairness, and the courage to stand up for yourself. Too often, people let rules and authority control them, even when those rules don't make sense. But sometimes you have to draw the line and say, enough is enough. What's even more powerful is that the homeowner didn't fight back with violence or anger. He fought back with creativity, cleverness, and a little bit of irony. That's what made his move so effective. It wasn't just rebellion. It was a lesson. So, here's the question for you. If you were in his shoes, what would you have done? Would you have given in to the HOA's demands, or would you have stood your ground? If you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's not easy, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the best way to fight back isn't with anger, but with creativity and courage. What happens when you push back against people who are used to being in control? Most of the time, they don't just back down, they fight harder. And that's exactly what happened after the homeowner towed away the HOA's clubhouse sign. The moment that sign was dragged away, the power balance shifted. The HOA, which had always acted like the neighborhood boss, suddenly looked weak. And if there's one thing an HOA hates, it's losing face in front of the people they're supposed to control. The HOA's retaliation. The HOA didn't waste any time. They sent angry letters, written in bold letters with words like violation fines and legal action. They accused the homeowner of damaging community property. They threatened to charge him thousands of dollars. But here's the part they didn't expect. The homeowner was prepared. Remember, the sign was installed partly on his land. For years, the HOA had ignored that detail. Now, that mistake was coming back to haunt them. He showed them the property survey papers. He reminded them that the land where the sign stood was his. Suddenly, their threats didn't look so strong anymore. How could they claim community property if the sign wasn't even fully on community land? The community's reaction. Meanwhile, the neighbors were buzzing with excitement. Some thought the homeowner was reckless, but many secretly admired him. For years, they felt trapped under the HOA's endless rules about mailbox colors, lawn height, and even what kind of flowers they could plant. To them, the homeowner was a hero. He had done what they wished they could do. Stand up and say, enough is enough. People started whispering about how unfair the HOA had become. And the louder those whispers grew, the more support the homeowner had behind him. The HOA doubles down. Of course, the HOA couldn't let this slide. They were embarrassed. They were angry. So they tried new tactics. First, they issued heavy fines, hoping money would break the homeowner's spirit. Then they tried intimidation, sending board members to his property to inspect for other violations. They even spread rumors, claiming he was a troublemaker who didn't care about the neighborhood. But none of it worked. The homeowner stayed calm, confident, and strong. He knew he wasn't alone anymore. He had neighbors who supported him, and he had proof that the HOA had crossed a line. The turning point. The real turning point came during a community meeting. The HOA thought they could use the meeting to rally everyone against the homeowner. They painted him as someone who was disrespecting the community. But when the floor opened for questions, something surprising happened. One neighbor after another stood up, not to attack the homeowner, but to support him. They talked about how unfair the HOA rules had become. They brought up stories of being fined for ridiculous things, like leaving a garden hose out or having a basketball hoop in the driveway. The room began to shift. Instead of siding with the HOA, the community started questioning why they had given the HOA so much control in the first place. The HOA backtracks. Feeling the pressure, the HOA tried to negotiate. They offered to drop the fines if the homeowner returned the sign. But the homeowner had a condition of his own. He wanted the HOA to agree, in writing, that his tractor could stay on his property without harassment. At first, they resisted, but with the community watching and their reputation crumbling, they finally gave in. They signed the agreement, and the tractor stayed. The sign? Well, let's just say it wasn't coming back anytime soon. The bigger lesson. This wasn't just a win for one man. It was a wake-up call for the entire neighborhood. For too long, the HOA had acted like rulers instead of neighbors. But this story proves something important. Power only works if people let it. The homeowners showed that you don't have to fight with anger or violence to make a point. Sometimes you just need courage, cleverness, and the will to stand your ground. His act of towing the sign became a symbol of freedom, a reminder that people should never be afraid to defend what's rightfully theirs. Why this matters to you. You may not own a tractor. You may not live in a neighborhood with an HOA. But here's the truth. All of us face situations where someone tries to control us unfairly. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's in school. Maybe it's even in our own families. The lesson here is simple. You don't have to stay silent when someone crosses a line. You don't have to give in just because they sound powerful. When you stand up calmly, smartly, and confidently, you inspire others to do the same. The lasting impact. Long after the sign was gone, the story lived on. Neighbors told it at barbecues. Kids whispered it at the bus stop. And new homeowners heard it as a legend. The day one man towed the HOA sign with his tractor. And you know what? The HOA never tried to mess with his tractor again. In fact, they became more cautious with everyone. They realized they had pushed too hard. And now the community wasn't afraid to push back. So, here's the challenge for you. Think about the areas of your life where you've been letting someone else control the narrative. Is it time to stand your ground? Is it time to tow away your own sign? Whatever that might be, if this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with your friends, your family, or anyone who needs a reminder that strength isn't about size or force. It's about courage and creativity. And remember, sometimes the most powerful way to fight back is to use the very thing they try to take from you.